Our great nation has become a unipolar power in this world, and how we have achieved that status and how we continue to maintain that status continues to breed more acts of violence against us and our friends and our interests overseas. And it really is a huge concern, that exact direction that we're taking. My first-hand experience as a United States Marine Corps terrorism expert and later as a civilian has given me a very objective view of our nation, both here and from abroad. That's an objective view that not only are my fellow candidates can have, but also our current representative. Now, I've resided in 2 different European countries over the last decade, and I know from first-hand experience that our former allies and our current friends see no difference in the act of terrorism that we're facing against us now and our own military actions that we're taking overseas. And I believe the time is long overdue for we as a nation to change that direction before it leads to a larger crisis where the world once again realigns itself, and this time they do so against us. And our elected officials are to blame for this direction and what they've put us through, and it's well past time that we hold those very leaders responsible. They've put all of us in a higher scale of danger, and I believe that they've taken away what we used to have as a blanket of freedom we all used to sleep under, which I proudly serve to defend and protect. They've taken away that blanket of freedom and they've replaced it with a blanket of fear. And those very leaders need to be held responsible, and we need to change the direction that we're heading before it does lead to a larger crisis. Thank you. In terms of ending the war, I have to look at one of the biggest mistakes that the Bush administration and our current representative made, and that was sending Paul Bremer in and the de-Baathification process. The Ba'ath Party had control of the majority of that country, and it was like, put it in simplest terms, it was like a giant union. And to become a teacher, a doctor, any decent paying job, you had to belong to that party. And we saw 94% of the population belong to that party. Paul Bremer came in and said anyone at all who had any ties to the Ba'ath Party was thrown out of government immediately. That doesn't leave a very large percentage of anyone who has any type of experience to run that government, to provide health care, or any of those sorts of things. And the majority of those Ba'ath Party members were not involved in Saddam Hussein's atrocities. They were just working under the Ba'ath Party in order to make a living and get by every single day, just like the majority of us try to get by every day. In conclusion, I do believe that it is definitely our responsibility to rebuild Iraq. I believe we need to look at anybody who's contributed to this current administration, and they should not be allowed to contribute to that rebuilding process. I have absolutely no doubt that Iran has its hand in part of that, but threatening them and with such action is absolutely not the way to go. We have, a couple of presidential candidates left, and one of which I believe is ready to sit down, take his tie off and sit down and talk with Iran and assist. Do you blame Iran for being involved and trying to remove us from there? I don't know if you can, after we put so much money and effort behind Saddam Hussein in the 80s to fight that. And everything's come back to bite us. Every time we've supported someone or opposed someone, it continues to come back to bite us. And we have to think carefully in the future about that type of involvement, and just look at every case has come back to bite us on every single occasion. And what we need to do is definitely sit down with Iran. They see us as occupying their holy land as well, and we need to work with all of the surrounding community and find us a solution, ask for their assistance in stabilizing that.
In 2 minutes or less. Yeah, right.
Well, first off, our budget of the Department of Defense is at a level which I can't put specifics on exactly what kind of reduction we can make, because the Department of Defense is currently, its budget reflects also upon the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is over decades and decades has been significantly underfunded. And that's something we need to look at. If we can make a permanent movement to remove the Department of Veterans Affairs out from under the Department of Defense, then I think we can make significant reductions in the defense spending. But while it's still under the Department of Defense, I say we need to continue to increase it to take care of our veterans who have probably served that are being denied treatment every single day. I've been through that system. It's let me down for 8 years now. I wonder what it's doing to these kids that are coming home today, and I wonder exactly what these guys that have been home for decades are still going through. Until we find a way or find a movement to get out of there and work with them in order to establish a definite safe route out of there, they're going to continue to deem us as an extremely threatful force right in their front door. And you know, that's what it's all about. Their resources are in danger, their way of life and their government are being threatened right now by a Western world that doesn't have any understanding of their way of life or their needs or their wants. And until we end our current occupation and possibly involve them in that aspect, they're going to continue to add fuel to the fire and want us out of there. Why I completely agree with you, the fact that it used to be good. That was more so before the industrialized revolution. Now instead of putting people to work, we have machinery and industrialized equipment that take care of all that, and it just puts more people out. In terms of changing the bumper sticker, I don't know, I'll have to think about that. I don't have an exact catchy phrase, but you know, it may be, you know, war is good for the economy if you're an undertaker or something. So I've been behind Senator Barack Obama from the get-go. When they first started this entire process, I was still living over in Austria, and I know for a fact that Senator Barack Obama has the majority of the international community behind him. They realize he is, you know, much like myself, ready to take the tie off and sit down and talk with all of our friends and our enemies and try to move forward on peaceful processes. And I also know, I believe that he will, you know, people say he doesn't have the experience behind him to lead the nation, but I believe he's not as much of a bulldog, and he will actually make sound decisions on who he fills his cabinets with and who he trusts to advise him on the most important issues instead of who he owes. And I think those are very important factors, and I made my decision, and I've stood up a long time ago and said that I know who I want to work with when I get to Washington, D.C., and that, in fact, is our next president, Senator Barack Obama. My experience both internationally and domestically, you know, gives me the ability to be ready to take on any type of assignment that I'm given once elected. To point one out, I think deep in my heart it would definitely be the Veterans Committee, first and foremost. But as my wife and I live without health insurance in our great nation, and in her nation we live with health insurance, that's another field that I'd really love to jump on top of as well. There's so many issues that I have both international and domestic experience on that I think I'll be ready to lead and change things regardless of what committee I become assigned to. And you know, you see these ads on television for the United States Marine Corps, and they say how the change is forever. And you know, I'm a proud supporter of that fact, and a proud proof of that fact that it is absolutely forever. And whatever position or committee that they would place me on as a freshman, I'll be ready to stand up and lead and not take any guff.